I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender. Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
You know, there's all these books about how to be an entrepreneur, how to sell, how to negotiate, how to come up with great ideas. But a lot of that is BS. It's like after someone's been an entrepreneur and they created some business with zero revenues and then they sell it for $1 billion or $2, and then they get to write a book or give a TED talk on here's how I was successful as an entrepreneur. This is just a lot of garbage. And I wanted to do a podcast about not what mistakes entrepreneurs make, but all the mistakes I made in the 2.5 decades or 3 decades that I've been an entrepreneur. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to say whether I should have or should not have made these mistakes. I'm just going to say what I did, analyze why I think they were a mistake, and there's no BS. You could decide whether you could decide whether these were mistakes or not. I'm looking back and I view these as mistakes, and hopefully you can avoid them on your own path to entrepreneurship. So back in the 90s, I started an agency. I was making websites for clients. So for instance, a company would come to me and say, "Hey, can you build this website for us for $20,000? And I would build the website. Now, here's mistake number one. I did not understand the difference between a service and a product. So what does that mean? Well, when you have a service business, people hire you to do something, you do it, you get paid, and you make a little bit of a profit on it. So I would make a website. I would maybe spend $5,000 making that website with employee costs, and then I would charge $20,000 or something like that. Here's an example of something I did one time. So we were making AmericanExpress.com, which was a huge, huge website. American Express had no website at the time. I was making that website, and I wrote this software this website was going to be like 60,000 pages. So I wrote this software to help create all the pages. And not only that, I set it up so that on every page, employees at American Express and all the different departments that the website was for, employees would be able to keep track of or make note of mistakes or suggestions on the website. And then I, the creator of the website, would get all the suggestions and see which page they were referring to and so on. So it was this kind of tool for generating pages and also a tool for keeping track of everyone's comments. So it was like a web development tool, almost like a sort of WordPress, like a corporate WordPress 5 or 6 years before WordPress was even created. But I didn't want American Express to know that a lot of the pages were being generated by the software because I was afraid they would think how easy it was to make the website. So here I made this incredibly valuable web development tool for collaborating and sending suggestions to all the people in all the different departments. And I was afraid to mention it to anybody because I didn't want them to know that I was making this tool to make building the website easier. Meanwhile, a tool like that could have been worth $100 million or $1 billion. Who knows? That could have been the entire business, was building tools for making websites instead of actually building websites myself. So it's always important to remember that software and products are more valuable than services. Services you can't scale, products you can scale. Services require me to do all the work. Products, you could make money while you sleep. They just buy the tool and that's it. So that was a big mistake. I had a profitable business instead of a business where I was raising money and banking on how great this product would be in the future. Anyway, that was a mistake. It's okay to make a service business, but the goal of building a service business should be to figure out what products, how you could productize the services as easily as possible, because that's where the real value is. All right, next mistake. I'm going to call this the 100-day rule, but I'm calling it that because my friend Joey Coleman wrote a book about this. But basically, I was super bad at follow-up. I was always good at sales. Like I was a big believer, and still am, that people need websites, that companies need websites. Believe it or not, many companies still don't focus on building out their web presence or social media presence or whatever. But I was always bad at following up. I was so bad. For instance, one time I pitched JP Morgan. JP Morgan didn't have a website. So I pitched jpmorgan.com. They loved it. They got in touch with me. They sent me emails. They made calls. I was just horrible at follow-up and I would ignore it. And I just never got that client. So that's really bad. I'm not going to talk about that. But what's almost as bad as if you get a new client, you have to be able to keep a new client. There's a saying, the best new clients are your old clients. So you should have a good relationship with your new clients so that you could build more and more services that you could charge for. So there's a rule, the 100-day rule of client interaction. Every single day with every new client, I should have called them and just said, hey, how's it going? Or, hey, is there anything I can help you with? No matter what, I should have done that every single day. If you follow the 100-day rule of client interaction, you have a client for life. So I messed up on that, not only with my agency business, but with my hedge fund business. I should always have kept in touch. I lost hedge fund investors because I didn't keep in touch enough. Like they would call me and I would not call them back, and they would pull their money out because they needed to know where their money was. And I respect that. So I was always really bad at following up in almost every single business I've been involved in. So always remember the 100-day rule of client interaction. Don't think that you could just ride on sales and everything's going to be okay. They don't care about that. People, deep down, everybody wants a friend. They don't want a website. They don't want a hedge fund manager. They want someone you could talk to. That's the importance of the 100-day rule of client. I had a client once that was so annoying. Like he would call me up in the middle of the night and be literally crying because he couldn't figure out if he should take this job or another job. And, you know, sometimes I went into overdrive with some clients, whereas other clients I would ignore. Okay, next one. Very critical. This is the key for why I would constantly go broke. I went broke in 2000 through 2003. I went broke in 2004. I went broke in 2008. I went broke in 2012. I went broke all of the time. And here's the key. This is really important. Being an entrepreneur is not about taking risks. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur now. I'm going to take risks, quit my job, go for the gold, whatever. And it's not about taking risks. You could have a great idea and you will miss out because you did not carefully model risks. So for instance, this is an example. One time I was on the board of a company and I remember I got the financials and it looked to me like they were going to run out of money in 6 months. And so I called up the CEO and I said, it's not like you're out of money in 6 months. You're broke right now. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you can't raise money in the next 6 months. Everyone's going to see that you're totally broke and you're not going to be able to raise money. It's over. Your business is over. So I had to get involved. I had to get board members involved. I had to figure out how they were going to sell the company, the whole thing. And the CEO was mad at me every single step of the way because I kept insisting we're going to have to sell the business before you run out of time. The day before, 6 months later, the day before he was going to run out of money for paychecks, we found a buyer. He sold the company. He made $12 million. And I don't think he's ever made that before. And that's what happens when you don't model risk. You could lose everything. So I used to make these huge investments where it would be 20% of my net worth because I would always calculate on the upside how much money I can make without calculating on the downside, without calculating risk. So I always now, everything I do, you could have a ton of ideas, but you'll get none of them finished if you don't model risk. If you don't validate an idea, which is another topic, but you have to make sure, one way to validate an idea is I started lots of businesses that would fail because I didn't really know how to, what was needed, what products were needed. But like, for instance, let's say I was making podcasting software. I would know how to validate the idea because I know what's needed for a podcast. So that's one way to calculate risk is if I know that I can use this, that's one way for me to validate the idea. Another way for investing is if someone invests alongside of me. Like, let's say there was one company I invested in where Peter Thiel, who was the founder of PayPal, first investor of Facebook, founder of Palantir, he was involved in this investment. I got lucky to be involved in it. And I didn't have to validate the idea because I figured he's smarter than me. So that's one way to validate the risk and model the risk. Another thing is, I had no way to measure, like with all my investing, like if I'm investing in stocks, or investing even in private companies, I won't invest more than 1% of my net worth because that's how I model risk. If it turns out the investment's great, then I'll make a lot of money. But if the investment's no good, all I did was lose 1% of my net worth, and that's a way to model risk. Another way to model risk is, like I was said before, products versus services. So you have more choices for making revenues and scaling if you don't risk losing service clients. Just always make sure, like one business I started, Stock Picker, I got rid of a lot of risk because I found a partner, thestreet.com, which the deal I made, they didn't give me any money, but I gave them 50% of the company, and in exchange, they allowed me to put links to my website on every single page of their website. So I got rid of risk because that's how I was able to get traffic for my website, is to make this deal. So even though it cost me 50% of the company, I got rid of the risk of how do you get distribution. So that's a huge, huge risk. Another risk I've made is, I don't know, I started a newsletter business, but I had an email list first. I built an email list for years before I even made one dime of income because I knew that with an email list, I could sell newsletters, and that's a way to start this business because it was another way for me to reduce risk. So, and also I would say the best businesses I've ever been involved with were businesses where I didn't have to raise money. When you raise money, you have to cave in to the investors before you even really start the business. So I'm always making sure that I'm the boss at first, that I'm not dependent on raising money. I'm not dependent on investors so fast, because that's another way of risk, is if I could start the business with customers first without as much risk, then that saves risk. I'm not, let's say I make a product and there's no customers, well, then that business is not working. I don't need to risk having investors. So anyway, more. One time I started a business and I got an offer. This is in the mid '00s. I got an offer and I liked the offer. So I was able to get the deal. But when I got the final deal, I realized they wanted a 6-year employment agreement. And if I didn't stay for the 6 years, then I would have to make all the money for the whole deal. So instead of, I would have to lose all the money for the deal, even 6 years later. And the problem is that I realized there was no value in the business other than me. Even though the business was doing well and it was making profits, the bank that was buying my business didn't buy it for the business. They bought it for me. And the deal I would have to give back the deal unless I stayed in a job for 6 years. It's almost like in prison or something. So what I mean is, you can't have value other than yourself. You have to have a product. The business should live without you existing. Like right now, Jeff Bezos on Amazon will, just like Steve Jobs, Amazon will probably, let's say Amazon quit tomorrow. He would lose some market share. He would probably lose stock a little bit because everybody's so dependent on Jeff Bezos. But the reality is, just like Apple, is that the business will survive without Jeff Bezos or without Steve Jobs. But in my case, in that one instance, I had no value in the business other than myself. So you have to create value outside of yourself, no matter what. You have to figure out ways through clients being, not dependent on you, with contracts not being dependent on you, with good experts that people could rely on without you as the owner. So you have to always create value outside of yourself. Now, this is a tricky issue, but diversification. Now, everybody talks about focus, like, oh, you should be focused in your business. And, that's the way to build a business is keep focus. First off, nobody really is focused. Like Jeff Bezos, Amazon, first example he wanted to do was make a bookstore. But if all he did was an online bookstore, he'd probably be out of business right now. Then he started making clothes. Then he started making diapers. Then he started making food. And then he got creative where he got it meta. So he started creating the infrastructure, like the cloud, so like Amazon Web Services, so people can use it to use his infrastructure instead of just buy items. And then he created, let's make a Kindle, so it's a device. Let's make videos like Amazon Prime, so you can sell it on TV. So now he even is making a rocket ship company so he can sell bandwidth in countries like Africa and so on. So he's diversified a huge amount. He even sells Whole Foods, grocery stores. So he's diversified in so many different ways. That's how you diversify. Richard Branson, he doesn't just sell a magazine. He doesn't sell just a store. He doesn't sell just an airline. He sells 300 different businesses under the Virgin brand name. So diversification is not just about, I'm going to invest in oil stocks and tech stocks. If you start a business, if you're an entrepreneur, you need for at least you might not have it day one, but eventually you need to diversify between products and services. You need to diversify across many products. You need to meta your services, meaning if you let's say you sell a bunch of online courses. Well, maybe also it's good to sell some software for making online courses easy. So now you have a product as one item and products as another. So diversify, and even for stocks, it's not good enough to just own oil stocks and tech stocks and say, that's all I need for diversification. You need to diversify strategies. So maybe you sell some stocks and maybe you sell some day trading strategies. Maybe you sell some bonds. So there's lots of investing strategies you can use to diversify, but diversification is needed to help reduce risk.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov. You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. Next, this is kind of important. And I remember a long time ago, I talked to Mark Cuban about this, and I said, you must have had some passion for what you're doing in order to create so much success. And he said, no, I just wanted to make a ton of money. And I get it. I respect that. But I don't think it's true. If you look at his company, broadcast.com, it was originally called, I forgot what it was called, Real Audio or something like that. Anyway, it ended up being called broadcast.com. Why did he start it? Well, he lived in Texas and he wanted to watch basketball games that were playing in Ohio. So he created technology, basically broadcast.com, so that he could create, basketball games through audio or video. And that was his business. He wanted to solve a problem. He had a passion about basketball. He wanted to watch games that were not available on television. And so by doing something he was passionate about, he was able to create a great job because he didn't want to have a bad audio experience. He wanted a good one so he could watch basketball games. And that's how he created the product. And it turned out to be good for many things. And that's how he created broadcast.com, which he sold for billions and made a ton of money. I think I've done a lot of different businesses, and the only things that have ever made money was when I actually passionately loved the business idea. So in the early 90s, there weren't that many people who knew how to make a website. I loved making websites. I learned how to make websites almost from the beginning of the internet. I had no business though. I didn't know anything about business. So all I knew was how to make websites. I wished I had made more products back then, but I did have passion that everybody was going to make websites and I loved making them. That's why I would even do stuff just for the fun of it. Like I was doing this website for HBO where I didn't have to do it, but I loved doing it. I used to make this website called 3 a.m. where I would interview people at 3 a.m. I probably interviewed so many prostitutes, drug dealers, pimps, Johns. I remember one time there was this bus that would go back and forth between Queens and Rikers Island so that they could, at 3 a.m, they could, if anybody was bailed out, they could leave the jail at 3 a.m. And I would go to the worst places in the city and interview everyone, like in this case, the pimps or people going to the bus or people getting out of the jails. And I did this for years and years because I loved doing it. And it helped me basically be really creative about the kind of websites I was making. Every time I've ever started a business where my goal was just making money, it all failed. Like if I bought, I always wanted to make like a dating website because I thought those were great ideas, but I really didn't know anything about it. So I never was able to make that good. Instead, when I made a website that was a financial social media website, that worked because I knew what I wanted. And for instance, right now I'm working on software in the podcasting space, and I know what I'm doing because that's an area I have passion about. So passion really is important. It might be passion for how business models work. You might have a passion about investing. You could have a passion about software. You could have a passion about helping people have a better experience with their social media. But you do need to have software so you're willing to put in the hours and figure out all the nuances that all your competitors are trying to do. They don't have the passion. That means you're going to do a better job. Let's see. What else? Because, there's a lot of things. And most of the time in the past 2.5 years, it's really, really hard to do a successful business. Like, I don't really like having investments because then you have to pretend you like all these people who are in investing, which, by the way, I've had great investors that I love, but every now and then it's just a real problem. I hate investing money unless I really have a product that's ready and I'm confident in and I have great partners. That's, so it's much better to bootstrap than raising money as long as you can. The other thing is that don't be so eager to give up everything else and start a business. You don't know until you have revenues and you're excited and a product's finished. You don't know if the business is going to work. Nobody knows if the business is going to work. So my first business that I ever started, I kept my full-time job for 18 months before I started a business because I didn't want to take the risk. I didn't know. I was scared. And you know what? Who cares? Better to stay in the game than to risk everything. And believe me, I've taken risks so many times. I would say it's only in the past 10 years that I realize how much more important it is to take risk into account. So what's another thing that is critical? Mistakes that I've made for entrepreneurship. Certainly sins of omission. So I mentioned how I used to make this software in my first business that maybe could have been a business, but then I just didn't. But every year there's been ideas that I've been excited about that I really like the idea, and then I would just not really follow through, or I would not have enough confidence on it, or I just would not follow through with the idea. Like, I don't know, even now I have tons of ideas, but or I'll do an example from a long time ago. So one time I was working on my website called Stock Picker. It was like this financial social media site. And I decided, what would be cool is if I build a way for people to ask any questions and other people could answer those questions. It was like a Q&A site. And all I did is I created that in my one little website about finance. But I could have used that technology for any topic, not just financial stuff. So I should have created separately a whole Q&A type of website instead of just bolted onto my financial website that I made. And now you have sites like Quora, which are Q&A sites. There's really not that much. It's not rocket science. It's not something hard to make. It was basically the same functionalities I made back in 2006, but I didn't make it. I just used it as a little bolt-on to my site that I already was making. And Quora is worth billions of dollars right now. So that's like an example of a sin of omission. You should always think of, for any idea, what's the broadest use for an idea? And always think as generic as possible. So yes, I had this Q&A site that I should have used, but along with other things, and instead it was the only thing I used it for, and let other people make $1 billion company, whatever. The other thing is, I would say, and this is part of the risk thing, but I would often not do a due diligence, not do the research needed to make a successful business. For instance, I had an idea where, and this is still an idea, I think that would be good, but right now you don't need to wear a suit. You don't need to wear ties or button-down shirts or really uncomfortable slacks or whatever. I've worn nothing but pajamas for the past 4 months because it's the comfortable clothes ever. Because by definition, you could fall asleep with pajamas, wearing pajamas. So my idea is take pajamas, have more creative designs so you can wear them, outside, and maybe also throw in the fact that everyone's worried about coronavirus and use fabrics that are copper infused, so less chances of getting sick or infection from a virus or whatever. So this is an idea that I think could be an interesting idea, but I will tell you, I probably will not, execution on this because I'm not willing to put in the research in order to create this as a fun or interesting or profitable business. And also that's because I think I'm trying too many things right now. Sometimes you have to limit all the things that, you want to do. But I will also say that always the best idea is doing the things you love doing. So, for instance, I have an idea right now, which, like I mentioned earlier, which is a great solution that I need in the podcast experience. And I have expertise in podcasts, so I'm working on that as well as doing things I like working on articles or books or podcasting or whatever. And that takes a lot of time, so I don't have time to create too many businesses. So you have to make sure you don't bite off more than you can afford to spend as well. So I think that's most of the mistakes that I've made. I would say, again, the most important thing is risk. Getting rid of risk is the most important thing in anything. Is the most important thing in starting a business. The next thing is making sure you create something that's scalable. After you figure out what it is you're doing, after you figure out how to provide value, then it's important to create a product instead of a service so that their business can survive no matter if you're there or not. And then don't, a lot of people say, oh, ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is everything. That is total bullshit. Yes, there's lots of ideas out there, but I see so many people don't understand anything. Like execution ideas are a subset of ideas. So I've seen a lot of people with good ideas, but they don't know how to execute. They said, oh, well, I need to hire these programmers, or I need to raise this money, and then I could build my idea. Figure out whatever it takes to provide your service before you raise any money. And then that way you could test out the idea without, wasting money. You could test out your idea before it takes months to execute on building an idea. So figure out ways to experiment and validate an idea and even get customers before you even spend a dime, so that you could take as little risk as possible and that you could get your business up and running before you even raise money. So there's always a way to execute super easily and super cheaply. Like a great example is Richard Branson. He had an idea, I could make an airline. He didn't raise money and raise billions of dollars and then buy a bunch of fleet of airlines. He just borrowed an airplane from Boeing. He used persuasion to show the people at Boeing that, hey, if you lend me this airplane, then finally there'll be competition for British Airways. So it's good for you to lend me this airplane. And then he convinced Heathrow to give him a runway. And boom, he was able to execute on his idea without raising billions of dollars, which is what it would cost. So that's incredibly important. So again, keep in touch with your customers, the 100-day rule. Try to avoid bootstrapping. Try to model risk. Getting rid of risk is the most important thing. Try to create value outside of yourself. Try to diversify all your sources of revenues. Try validating your idea. If you have something that you're passionate about, at least keep track of the idea so that maybe the idea is bigger than you think and you could try creating it. Make sure you have passion for what you want, or else it's just not fun and you probably won't make money anyway. I remember one business I started, I had a huge passion for it, and I saw other people who were competing with me, but I didn't care because I knew I was going to create something that I wanted and that they were just doing this idea because it was like a business school project. So I knew I was going to understand everything more than the competition would. So I don't know if this all helps or not. The critical thing is, even when you're great at coming up with ideas, even when you're great at execution, always remember that mistakes are much easier to happen than execution or the ideas. And that is the way most people fail, is that they make too many mistakes when they are becoming entrepreneurs. And hopefully by describing some of the mistakes I've had, hopefully it'll help someone who's listening to that. And if you have any questions about the type of mistakes someone makes as an entrepreneur, then you can ask me questions at 203-509-8607. Feel free to text me and I will answer. By the way, I just want to mention this entire podcast, I've had an enormous migraine. I can't even see right in front of me. So if I sounded incoherent at different points, no problem. That's the reason. Or maybe I'm just having early onset Alzheimer's, which is possible as well. But good luck. Send me questions, and I hope you enjoy this.
Your daily dose of gaming just got way more epic with the Snapdragon processor powering the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. Snapdragon processors give you the premium mobile experience that triggers your inner champion. Whenever you want, wherever you want. Get ready for edge-of-your-seat performance, advanced customizations, ultra-realistic graphics, and adrenaline-boosting speeds that have the power to move you in more ways than one. Follow us on Instagram at Snapdragon Official.